Hey, I'm Theo and thank you for joining me once again. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the best decks since the mini set. It's been a couple of days since the mini set and a few things have changed. Though not quite as much as with previous mini sets, where cards like Bran and Yoxron did shake up the meta, but still some things changed. So let's go over those. I've got 15 decks prepared for you. I've got, of course, the 5 best decks, then 5 more decks that are pretty good to climb with, and then 5 more decks that are maybe not quite as good, but maybe more fun, or it's a deck for class that didn't have a deck yet. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to make sure you're one of the first 1000 subs while you still can. Anyway, so let's get started with the best deck. I think that's currently the Flood Paladin. It was already pretty good for the mini set, but I think with changes in the meta it's got even slightly better. This deck has some insane early blowout turns. Where yeah, you can have with a card like Showdown, you play that on 2, you can often play Ziliax with it, and yeah, you already pretty much win the game on turn 2. It's got these crazy turns. I've had games where on turn 2 my opponent just... well, I played a minion, they played Showdown, they played Ziliax, they played another 1-drop with the coin, they played Sea Giant, yeah, like 20 plus damage on board turn 2. The game is just over then. So yeah, that's what makes this deck really powerful. It's also really good in pretty much every other aggro deck, and since aggro is pretty popular, this makes this deck the really the best choice at the moment. And yeah, the Ziliax, people always ask about this. It's the Paladin plus ticking, pretty much the go-to Ziliax for any aggressive deck that wants to fill the board. And then next up we have the Pain Warlock, a deck that actually got quite a bit of help with the mini set. After the nerfs, it went a bit away when Imprisoned Horror went to a 4-4 and we had the location go to 4 mana. So yeah, this deck doesn't run the location anymore. But the new cards really helped this deck out a lot. We've got Mass Production, 1 mana, draw 2 cards, and self-damage for 3. This does pretty much everything this deck wants to do. Gets you quickly down to 10 health. So you can play those Molten Giants, which is usually what wins games. And it's crazy that, yeah, it's Molten Giants is usually the best keep in the mulligan. It's so good. Get this down to 0. Same with Imprisoned Horror. Just get that down to 0, then potentially copy it with Celestial Projectionist for another 1, and then shut your opponent down from reacting with a Speaker Stomper. Also, this deck is running Ziliax Perfect Ticking, not quite like the other aggro decks where it's using the buff module, the pilot module, because yeah, Giants, they're already pretty good by themselves. Buffs aren't as useful, but I think you can still run it, but this list has the lifesteal module, because that can be pretty useful against other aggro decks, because you're going pretty low, and then having a cheap Ziliax can just heal you back up. And yeah, that's similar to Popcar as well, the reason why it's here, just a little bit of healing. And also the new card with the Infernal also helps quite a lot. You can actually go pretty low, and yeah, not really worry about your health. Often if you just go like below 10 health on like turn 4, you know, your opponent can't quite kill you yet from 10. Usually you need a bit more mana for that, and then you can maybe play another Mass Production, go to like 7 health, and then you play the Infernal, and yeah, it's a 4 mana 6/6 with Taunt, and then heals you a bunch, so your opponent can't kill you. It's extremely strong, and yeah, it really helped out the deck a lot with the mini set. And next up, it's yeah, Zarimi Priest again. Still, yeah, one of the best decks. After the nerfs, you thought maybe it was dead, but yeah, it's still here. It's still very good. And yeah, not really a lot has changed for this deck. And maybe the build has changed slightly, but overall it still functions the same way. Got the Ziliax, again, Pylon plus ticking, it's an aggro deck. Yeah, this is a deck can also have these great early blowout turns. Not quite as good as Paladin, but yeah, with get a bunch of 1-drops, Crimson Clergy, Funnel Cakes, and then playing 0 mana Thirsty Drifters early on, plus a Ziliax. Yeah, that wins a lot of games. And then if that doesn't work, you always got the late game now with Zarimi to fall back on to win the game with that. Also, this deck is running Leroy is a bit of a finisher, but yeah, it's not quite needed. I've seen decks run Hearth, so you can do that as well. And then next up, we have another Paladin deck. Yeah, Paladin is a pretty strongest patch. This time we got a Handbuff Paladin deck. I chose for the Excavate version though. It's a bit different. So there's basically 2 versions of Handbuff Paladin. You got the more aggressive one that is a bit more all in, and it's running chargers and buffs to the chargers. But this deck is can go a bit more late game. It can actually go on for quite a while. I faced the deck a bunch yesterday, and yeah, it felt like they never run out of cards. They get a lot of buffs. After 4 Excavate, you get the +3/+3 overall. As you can see here, the Azure Dragon, and yeah, buffing everything with +3/+3 is pretty big. Even the smallest minions are now a threat. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why this deck can go on for quite a while. The Ziliax here is the perfect plus ticking. You'll be buffing that a lot, and yeah, this is not quite a fill the board aggro deck. So I'm not running the Paladin module there, but instead the perfect module. Yeah, overall, yeah, it's not really running any of the new cards. Not really for this deck, but yeah, overall, it's just pretty well positioned in this meta. So give it a go if you like gigantifying your minions without actually having to play any gigantify cards. And then lastly, I think still pretty good is the Highlander Warrior. Yeah, this got nerfed. With Bren going to 8, but turns out, yeah, the rest of the deck is it's still pretty good. Against most matchups, especially in a more aggressive meta. Yeah, Bren often didn't come down anyway at 6 mana. So yeah, no, you definitely can't play this card thing as aggro. But yeah, pretty much Bren means that you pretty much beat any late game matchup, and yeah, that's why this deck is still good. It kind of locks out a bunch of other late game strategies because you're pretty much always going to lose to this deck. And yeah, it's a bit weaker now. It's not like Control used to be, where Control beat aggro, all the nerfs to the board's clears. Yeah, it hurts quite a bit in the early game, and even with slower decks, you can often capitalize on the early game against this deck. But overall, still a very strong deck once you get past that early game. Yeah, you're in a pretty good spot to win the game. I've got here the ETC, Armor Vendor, Red, Zola, but it's kind of flexible what you can put in here. And yeah, got the Highlander Twin module plus Perfect module, works really well with Bren. But I've also seen, instead of the Twin module, I've seen the Virus module, because then you get one very annoying Ziliax that is really hard to kill, and it still works with Boom, because you get, with the Reborn, you get 2 Ziliaxes. So all you need is 1 Ziliax to die, and you get a huge Inventor Boom. Now let's go to the next 5 decks that are not quite maybe tier 1, but still pretty good to climb with. First up, got 2 Hunter decks. I'll start with the Highlander Hunter here. It is running a new card. It's running the Product 9, which works really well with the secret package here. It's not running the new secret because it's a Highlander deck, so you don't really have the amount of weapons, I think, to run, the amount of secrets to make the weapon work. Yeah, running the good secrets, basically. It's Bait and Switch, it's Ice Trap, and it's Hidden Meaning. So yeah, there's usually, if you're playing Hunter, you can expect these 3 secrets. And on top of that, you have the Titan Forge traps to usually try and get one of these secrets. Although maybe like a freezing explosive trap. It does have its place sometimes. And you have Observer of Mysteries as well, which you kind of maybe hope you get some good mage secrets of that to get them back with that Product 9. Also a big part of this deck, besides the obvious Highlander cards with Thaldurin and Reno, is the Mystery Egg. So yeah, you're running a few big beasts here. We're running Hollowhound, Mr. Mukla, Tyrannosaurus, and King Plush. So then you can cheat one of those out, or 2 of them even with this. And yeah, that's pretty good, getting a 1 mana 10/10 or 4 mana, possibly clear the board. That's pretty strong. And you can get them back with Stranglethorn Heart. Yeah, that is the Highlander, and then the Ziliax here we have the Perfect plus Ticking. And in the ETC we got the Yelling Yodeler, Mystery Egg, and all out. Yeah, Mystery Egg is pretty good in this deck, as you can see, and that's why we have a second one, Yelling Yodeler, because if your opponent doesn't clear it, well, you get even more Big Beast for cheap. And yeah, you always have the miniaturized version of it, so always an easy way to combo that. And then the next Hunter deck we have is the Aggro Hunter, which was on top a few weeks ago. But yeah, with the nerf to Saddle Up, it got a bit worse. Meta changed a bit for the worse as well, but it's still a good deck to climb. Yeah, not much has changed. Saddle Up is gone to 4 mana, so you can't draw it anymore with Barak Kodobane. But yeah, this deck is running kill commands, so this still has cards to draw. The Ziliax has a Pylon ticking, as usual with the aggro decks. And yeah, it's still the same as before. Get on board early, and then yeah, buff it with Observer of Myths, Painted Canvasaur, or the Leok here. Give him Death Rattles with Saddle Up. And yeah, this deck can still have these really strong openers. Just a little bit harder now to make it stick with Saddle Up +1 mana, but still a very good deck. Then we have the Insanity Warlock. It was one of the most popular decks before the mini set. It's now gone down a bit because the other Warlock deck is just a bit better, a bit more popular. But this deck is still very good. It's running all the fatigue cards with encouraging Insanity to get those fatigue ticks up. And then, yeah, with cards like the Crescendo, you can push insane amounts of damage, with especially with Popcar. It's basically a full heal often after a few fatigue hits. Craze Conductor can be insane stats early. You can go like this Imp into Encroaching Insanity, and then bam, you already have 15, 16 stats on board on turn 4. So yeah, that's a crazy amount of stats for that early. And then yeah, it just has a bunch of bursts with the Truck Jam Tosser, again the Popcar. And yeah, the Encroaching Insanity deals damage as well. Just pretty strong deck overall. Also, if the damage is enough, you've got the Fizzle to, yeah, usually you want to copy Popcar with that and have even more burst with Popcar Crescendo. And then the Ziliax is the perfect plus ticking, because it's good against some other aggro decks. And then we have the Demon Hunter deck, maybe not as popular as it was before, but it's still definitely a viable way to climb. So yeah, a lot of cards here. The 4-cost slot, the core of this deck. Yeah, that's basically what this deck is all about. Umpire's Grasp into Window Shopper, and then the rest is almost filler to make that work, and a lot of damage in all these cards. And we've got the Ziliax, the Haywire plus a Power Module. So yeah, maybe if you don't draw Umpire's Grasp, or you go like Frequency Oscillator plus the Ziliax on turn 3, yeah, this can really win the game, because most decks can't really deal with a 7-elf minion on turn 3, and then yeah, it deals 10 damage the following turn. So still a pretty solid way to climb the ladder. Then we've got the Highlander Paladin, one of my current favorite decks. I was trying out the Whack-on-All, the new card. I don't think the other Paladin cards really will work in this. But yeah, this card, it wasn't very good, but you can run it. As you can see here, I've changed the deck a little bit compared to what I was playing on stream. I've got here in the ETC, we've got the Viper, Red, and Beam. But yeah, I think you can change the Viper and Red to the cards maybe that you like. And I've added the Living Horizon, because it can be really strong off Spirit of the Badlands. Yeah, the Ziliax is the Virus plus Perfect. Already said it earlier before, but yeah, this is one incredibly annoying module. It's also single target removal late game, which this deck does sometimes lack. So yeah, pretty strong Ziliax for this deck. Yeah, overall, pretty fun deck to play. I really like it, so yeah, it's not the cheapest one, but if you have the cards, I would really recommend try this one out. And then let's go to the last 5 decks, where we have first up the Highlander Shaman. Honestly, this could have been also among the last 5 decks, but those 5 decks were just slightly better. But still, this deck is pretty solid to climb. Not a lot has changed with the mini set outside one card, which is the Murloc Grofin. This one can be pretty powerful. Obviously, you have the synergy with the buff, with the Wish upon a Star. And yeah, if you triple that up with Shadow Block, it doesn't happen usually, but yeah, if it does happen, then you basically gigantify the 1-drop to become 7-10 stats. And then even better if you can triple it up with the Shadow Block, so you get 4 7-10s, or just with the Gigantify part, you get 4 8-8s, 3 of which has Rush, and yeah, that's going to win a bunch of matchups. Overall though, compared to the last time, yeah, this deck hasn't changed a lot. ETC is still the same with Dirty Red, Dehydrate, and Viper. And yeah, the Ziliax is the Twin plus Perfect module, because this works really well with Shadow Block, where you can possibly get 4 Ziliaxes. And next up we have the Spellmate, which my previous video was about, so go check it out if you're interested in this deck. Works pretty well now. It's not quite top tier, but it's actually playable now, so that's great. The malfunction helped a lot. And like I said in my previous video, yeah, Heatwave, Reverberation, Frost Lich, Cross Stitch are pretty interchangeable. And overall, yeah, the malfunction really helped this deck out a lot to get past that early game where it struggled a bit more. And then, yeah, in the late game, get that burn with maybe Manufacturing Error discounted and Elemental Companion, and you've got a whole lot of damage going on with this deck. And then we have a Rogue deck. I wanted to put the Cutlass Rogue deck here. Last time we had the Excavate Rogue, and that's still perfectly viable. There's some more Rogue decks as well. Got the deck where you shuffle your hand and get like those early giants on turn 4, copy those. That's definitely viable. But I wanted to highlight the Cutlass Rogue for this video, where, yeah, as the name implies, this deck is all about the Spectral Cutlass. It's pretty much built around this deck. yeah, you tutor it with the instrument tag, you play the Cutlass, and then you have a whole lot of random and a whole lot of weapon buffs to yeah, make this card win the game. We've also have the new card, the Dubious Purchase. So you've got a bit of extra draw, a bit of extra removal, and a new card, the Twisted Pack. I'm not convinced this is the way to go, but give it a try and let me know what you think of this. And yeah, pretty much just yeah, buff the weapon, play the board with the random stuff of the other cards, and then hit your opponent in the face with this weapon, which often goes up to 10 or more attack. And then in late game you still have the test in case you need it. But often, yeah, this Cutlass alone wins the game. And then we have a Druid deck. There's a lot of different Druid decks right now, but yeah, all of them don't really see a whole lot of play. So for this video I chose the Hybrid Druid with the spell damage package. You've got the Dragon package. You've got the Hero Power package. So a lot of different packages, but it does kind of work well together. You've got the early ramp, then you have the Hero Power to win in the late game. The Dragons to survive the mid game. It looks weird, but it kind of just works well together. So, fun deck to play, and definitely still a viable deck. And then the last deck I wanted to highlight was a Handbuff Death Knight. There's a bunch of Death Knight decks around, none of them are great. You've got Rainbow Death Knight still, you've got Plague Death Knight, even saw a Reno Death Knight that wasn't putting up stats that were too bad. But I wanted to highlight the Handbuff Death Knight because of the new card we have here, which is the Toy Snatching Geist, which is obviously great in a Handbuff deck, where yeah, you buff it a couple of times, and then you discover a big undead that is then 0, and yeah, you can get pretty good tempo plays with. Other than that, yeah, this deck has the usual cards you expect. It's got the Handbuff cards in Spellstone, Blood Tap, and the Amateur Puppeteer, which is insanely good with buffing stuff. You can then also put a Yelling Yodeler on it, and then yeah, you get so many stats, and then cards like Hollowhound or Swarm Guard or Darkspawn Quilter are just amazing being buffed. So yeah, overall decent deck, not amazing, but I think it's definitely a playable deck that you don't really see around. So that is it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what decks you are interested in trying. Thank you for watching, and until next time.